Episode 1, The Room with No Mirrors. Eloise woke to silence so perfect it felt stitched. No beeping. No birds. Not even the breath of another body. Just the distant toll of a bell, low, ancient, like a throat clearing at the end of the world. She sat up slowly, her head wrapped in gauze, her wrists light with a memory of restraint. Not tight, not bruised, but marked, as if she'd been held by something that wanted her still, but not broken. The room was white, but not hospital white, sanctuary white. Like this place didn't believe in illness, only interference. The window was locked. The door wasn't. There was a bed, a basin, a single silver cross above the headboard. And most of all, no mirrors. Not on the wall, not on the door, not even in the corner where light begged to reflect. She stood. Her legs answered like they remembered her. Even if her mind didn't, her name came back first. Eloise. Simple, sharp, like a clean knife sliding through fog. Everything else refused. The door creaked open to a hallway soaked in candlelight. Stone floors, carved archways, paintings of saints with eyes scratched out in gold leaf. And then, a voice. "Miss Byrne, you're awake." The woman wore gray robes, no shoes, a rosary wrapped around both wrists like shackles made beautiful. Her smile was gentle, too gentle, like someone trying to lull a dog back into its cage. "Do you remember your last confession?" Eloise blinked. "My what?" The nun nodded. "It's fine if you don't. That's why we're here. You came to St. Vesper to begin again. You signed the vow of forgetting. You're safe now." That word, safe, it echoed wrong, like a word spoken through someone else's teeth. She was led to the dining hall. No clocks, no phones, no eggs that she could see, only a long wooden table, with food that looked untouched by time. Bread, still warm, wine still breathing, and the other women, nuns, sisters, patients, they never blinked at the same time. Later, back in her room, she searched for something, anything, a reflection, a fragment, a flaw in the design, and found a drawer. Inside it, a folded paper. Trembling hands opened it. 2 lines, written in her own handwriting. "They told me I came here to heal, but I came here to finish what I started." Beneath it, something else, a photograph, her face, but not now, younger. Dirt on her skin, a candle in her hand, standing in front of the same altar. They made her kneel before tonight. She turned the photo over. 3 words scribbled in red. "You never left." Then the bell rang again. But this time it sounded closer. And this time it didn't stop. Episode 2, The Nuns Who Don't Blink. The bell rang for exactly 33 seconds. Not 30, not 35, 33. And when it stopped, everything in St. Vesper did the same. The candles froze. The air stilled. Even the trees beyond the stone windows stood like they were waiting to be granted movement. Eloise dressed in silence. The robes had been left at the foot of her bed. Gray, shapeless, and already her size. No undergarments. No shoes. Just a tag inside the collar with one word printed in red ink. Return. She didn't know what it meant. She put on anyway, because she'd learned something overnight. Refusal wasn't a language they spoke here. She stepped into the corridor. 3 women stood outside her door, not greeting her, not even looking directly at her, just standing, hands folded, chins down. But the moment she moved, they moved too, one behind her, one at her side, one slightly ahead. Not a welcome party, a formation. They led her to the refectory. Long table, plain bread, still warm broth in silver bowls. Dozens of women sat in silence, eating with perfect synchronicity. Except they didn't blink. Not once. She stared, waiting for the motion, the flicker, the human tick. Nothing. Eyes wide, mouths moving, hands mechanical, like watching someone feed a painting. Eloise sat down. Her bowl was already full. Steam rose in the shape of a symbol she didn't recognize. A loop broken on one end, like a snake that had chewed through its own tail. She didn't eat. No one insisted. They just watched. Not all of them. Just one. A girl at the end of the table. Younger. Eyes too dark. And a smile that didn't touch her mouth. Only her gaze. Later, she was led to the garden. No flowers. Only white stones in careful rows. No names. No crosses. Just rows. Meditation hour. One of the sisters said softly, "The earth listens better than the sky." Eloise sat, listened, heard nothing, until they watched because you used to be one of them. She turned. The girl from the dining hall stood behind her, barefoot, holding a single lily, crushed, eyes shining like someone else was behind them, watching too. "I'm sorry," Eloise whispered. "I don't remember." "You wouldn't," the girl said. "You asked them to take it. All of it. But sometimes forgetting doesn't bury things deep enough." The wind picked up, just for a second, and the stones around them shifted, like something beneath them exhaled. Eloise looked back at the girl, but she was gone. No footprints. No echo. Just a crushed lily, still warm, and a whisper in her ear that wasn't hers. "Don't blink. That's when they rewrite you." That night, Eloise lay awake. Her eyelids burned because she was afraid if she closed them long enough, she'd open them as someone else. Episode 3. St. Vesper's Mouth. There was a door behind the altar. Eloise hadn't seen it until the third morning, not because it was hidden, but because it was meant to be overlooked. Built of the same stone, same color, same silence. No handle, no lock, just a faint circular mark burned into the center, like someone had pressed a mouth against a stone and whispered until it caught fire. She stared at it during morning mass. No one else seemed to notice. The sisters bowed, sang, received nothing. But Eloise couldn't stop looking at that door. It didn't feel forbidden. It felt familiar, like something on the other side had been waiting for her to remember it. That night, she returned alone. The chapel was dark. The candles had been snuffed, but the door glowed faintly, just enough to outline the symbol. That burned circle. A mouth, open and empty. St. Vesper's Mouth. She didn't know how she knew the name. She just did, the way you know your own breath without ever seeing it. She reached out and touched the stone. Warm, not ancient warm, living warm. And then the hymn began, not from the chapel. Not from a speaker. From the door, a soft, layered hum that grew slowly into a chant. And the voice was hers. I opened the gate once. I told them I was ready. And they believed me. She stumbled back, but the stone didn't chase her. It simply breathed, like it was tired from trying to stay shut. And behind it, something whispered, "You called us in the shape of prayer. Now we're us in the shape of memory." The next morning, she asked Sister Talia, "What's behind the altar?" The nun's eyes flicked once toward the pulpit, then back. "Nothing. We sealed it years ago." "Why?" "Because it started speaking back." Eloise didn't ask more, but that night, she found a book, not in the library, under her mattress, bound in leather too soft to be animal, titled in gold, "The Folded Gospel." Inside, only one page had ink, and it read, "St. Vesper's Mouth does not open with keys. It opens with remembering." She slammed it shut, but from the wall behind her, 3 soft knocks. Slow, rhythmic, like someone or something was answering a question she hadn't asked aloud. She pressed her ear to the wall. Silence. Then a breath. Hers, but older, broken. And then it spoke. "You wrote the first verse, Eloise. Now sing the rest." Episode 4. What they fed me wasn't food. The bread was always warm. Not hot, not fresh, just warm, like it had been sitting inside a mouth, waiting to be passed on. Eloise sat at the same place each morning, third seat from the end, facing the wall with the headless saint. And every day, her bowl was filled before she sat. She never saw who did it, never saw it arrive. It was simply there. Broth the color of bone, bread that tore too easily, and wine that never tasted the same twice. The others ate in silence, not reverent silence, drugged silence, their eyes glossy, movements too slow, too practiced, like puppets that didn't know the strings were memories. Eloise hadn't touched the food since the first night, but now her hunger was turning cruel. Her stomach had begun to ache in circles, not from emptiness, but from confusion. That morning, she dipped her spoon into the broth, not to eat, to look deeper. She stirred slowly, watching the liquid spiral. And then she saw it, a small shape, thin, flesh-colored. At first she thought it was a bone. Then it blinked. She dropped the spoon. The bowl didn't tip. It swallowed, just once, and went still. She stood. No one moved, except for one, the girl from before, the one who smiled with her eyes. She looked up and whispered, "It's not food, it's forgetting." That night, Eloise snuck into the kitchen. There was no kitchen, only a stone room with a single cauldron, and a table covered in parchment, not recipes, confessions, written in dozens of different hands. Each sign at the bottom with just 2 letters, MF. She lifted one. "Read aloud. Take what I cannot carry. Boil it down. Serve it warm. Let me forget by taste." Suddenly, behind her, the cauldron hissed. She turned. Inside wasn't soup. It was ink. Thick, black, alive. Words floated to the surface, written in steam. "You ate your name." She stumbled back, her head spinning, and from the far corner, she heard it, a voice, her own, repeating a line she didn't remember saying. "I asked to forget. Now I remember why." She ran to her room, fell to the floor, sick, shaking, and when she looked in the mirror, no, wait, there was no mirror. There had never been a mirror, but in the window's reflection, she saw herself, eyes wide, mouth red, chewing. Episode 5. Her prayers are my voice. Eloise found the first prayer behind the chapel organ, scrawled in charcoal on the back of a hymn book cover, slanted, uneven, written like the hand that held the pencil was shaking or fighting back. But the words? They weren't desperate. They were calm, measured. "Blessed Mother, receive me whole. Bend my memory until it sings in the right key. If I forget my own name, let it echo through the next one who enters." At first, she didn't think much of it until she read it again, out loud, and heard her voice. Not now, not echo, pre-recorded, somewhere in the walls, repeating the words she had just spoken, perfectly, emotionlessly. She froze, turned. There was no one in the chapel, just the candlelight flickering in unnatural rhythm, like someone was clapping slowly. That night, she couldn't sleep. The walls creaked more than usual, and the wind, if it was wind, carried syllables it had no business holding. She wrapped herself in the blanket and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks. There were none, just patterns, symbols. One she recognized from the prayer, drawn above her bed like a crown. The next day, Sister Talia handed her a notebook, plain, bound in linen, smelled faintly of ash and lavender. "You've been writing again," Talia said. Eloise blinked. "I haven't written anything." The nun smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You will." Inside the notebook, page after page, filled, not in pencil, not in ink, charcoal, the same slanted writing from behind the organ, dozens of pages of prayers, all ending with the same 3 words. "Say it back." She flipped to the last page. A mirror was glued inside, the first mirror she'd seen in St. Vesper. Below it, one sentence. She prayed to be remembered. You were her answer. She looked into the mirror. It didn't show her reflection. It showed a girl kneeling, not in this room, but somewhere deeper, darker, and her lips, they were moving, saying something. So it was Eloise, at the exact same time, same rhythm, Same tone, same voice. She slammed the book shut, but the prayer didn't stop. It kept repeating inside her head, not like a memory, like a command. Bend my memory until it sings in the right key. Say it back. Say it back. Say it back. Later, she awoke with charcoal dust on her fingertips, and one line written on her arm in delicate, slanted script. I knew you'd come. Episode 6. The staircase they burned. They told her it never existed. There is no lower level. The fire was in the woods, not in the chapel. You must have heard rats in the walls. But she knew stone when it remembered fire. She felt it every time she knelt at the altar. The floor hummed like lungs beneath marble, and the smell, not of incense, of charred fabric and scorched salt. The first time she saw it was during communion. She dropped her chalice on purpose, watched the red stain crawl toward the crack in the floor, and disappear. Not soak, not evaporate, vanish. Later that night, when everyone slept, or pretended to, Eloise returned, armed with a candle, and the courage of a woman too haunted to stop chasing ghosts. She pried loose 3 tiles with a communion spoon. Beneath them, blackened stone, ash melted into mortar, and a handprint burned into the 4th step. The staircase led down, farther than it should have, deeper than the foundation plans allowed for, if there had ever been plans at all. The air was wrong. Not cold, not hot, just expectant, like something was holding its breath for her arrival. She counted 47 steps before the ash turned back to stone, and there at the base a door. No knob, no inscription, only a small plaque, rusted over with age. The vowed descent. What you forget shall be kept. What you keep shall burn. She reached to push it open, but it was already ajar. Inside, a circular room. Walls covered in melted wax, burned parchment, and what looked like bone dust. In the center, a single chair, still smoking. Strapped to it, nothing, but on the wall behind it, scrawled in soot, this is where they undid us. Eloise backed away, but the door closed on its own. Behind her, footsteps, soft, bare, not nuns, not human. She spun around, but saw only the chair, now occupied, by herself, smiling, but not blinking. Then came the voice, not from above, not from the room, from her throat, but she wasn't speaking. We were never meant to forget, only to hold the forgetting for others. But someone has to remember the staircase. The candle went out. The room stayed lit, not with flame, with memory. Her arms burned, letters rising across her skin like ink forced through pores. I walked willingly. They only burned the way back. She screamed, but the smoke didn't let it leave her mouth. It curled it, softened it, folded it into another line of the prayer, one she'd never learned, one she now was. Episode 7, Blood in the Baptismal Font. The font began to darken on the 7th day. At first, she thought it was a candlelight, the way flame bends water. But by morning, it no longer shimmered. It thickened, and the smell, not blood, not entirely, but old metal, wet iron, and something deeper, like prayer rotting. No one spoke of it. They still dipped their fingers in, crossed themselves, mouthed the same reverse blessing. Amen before mercy, memory before grace. Eloise stood before it at dusk, alone, the chapel doors wide open, yet the wind refused come in. The water, if it could still be called that, no longer moved. It waited, heavy, dense, like something beneath it had to be kept still. She leaned closer. The surface reflected nothing. Not her, not the rafters, not the world behind her, only black, until it whispered, yes, whispered, come closer, daughter. You have not been washed. You have been written. She stumbled back, but not far. The stone beneath her knees warmed, pulsed. A voice echoed from inside the font, but it didn't speak Latin. It spoke Eloise, and it knew how to speak her voice. She came here to be baptized, but she carried her own flood. Now we drank what was never poured. The water rippled, once, then rose, slowly, not overflowing, reaching. A long, wet finger of liquid climbed toward her face, stopped just shy of her lips, hung there, breathing. Say the vow again. She hadn't said any vow. Had she? She didn't remember, but her mouth moved anyway. The words fell out like teeth. I forget by offering. I offer by name. I name by blood. The font laughed. Wet, soft, sad. And from its center, a small object rose, floating, turning. A tooth. Her tooth. Still warm. Still perfect. But pulled from a memory she never remembered losing. She ran, past the pews, past the altar, but the sound of water followed her. Not footsteps, just dripping. Drop after drop after drop, each one calling a name, each one calling hers. When she reached her room, the candle on her desk had melted into words, charred across the wax. We baptize the body, not the soul. The soul still remembers. And from the hallway outside, a splash, not loud, not messy, just final, as if something had climbed out of the font and was now walking without a shadow. Episode 8. The sound beneath the choir. It started with a single note. Wrong. Not dissonant. Not out of key. Just older. Like a note that had waited too long to be sung. And when it came, it brought everything that had been buried with it. Eloise heard it during evening vespers. The choir sang as always. Soft, feminine, perfectly synchronized. Their robes swayed gently with each verse. Their lips moved like clockwork. But beneath them, under the music, not behind it, a second voice. Low, raw, and alone, not singing, begging. She blinked, sat straighter, looked around. No one reacted. No heads turned. No brows furrowed. The sisters kept singing, their mouths pouring light, but something below them was crawling in sound. The hymn ended. Applause was never given. Only silence, then retreat. As the others filed out, Eloise remained seated, her ears ringing, with a melody that never belonged. That night, she asked Sister Talia, "Do you ever hear another voice when we sing?" The nun smiled too quickly. All voices in St. Vesper sing together. No one sings alone. Eloise didn't sleep. She waited, and when midnight came, she returned to the chapel. Alone, no candles lit, just moonlight through stained glass, casting fractured saints on the floor. She sat in the front pew, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Sing again." At first, nothing. Then, the voice returned. No choir, no harmony. Just her, screaming inside a tune, a hymn twisted in its throat, repeating one line, "You seal me in the sound. Now open me in silence." Eloise rose, followed the voice. It wasn't coming from the altar. It came from below the organ, a wooden panel, loose at the edge. She pried it open. Inside, a vent, deep, cracked, and behind it, a mouth, not a face, just lips, stitched shut with red thread. But the sound still came through, vibrating the walls. The lips moved. Her voice echoed out. "You used to be my echo. Now you're my only listener." Eloise backed away, but her own throat burned. And when she opened her mouth to scream, the song came out, not in English, not in Latin, in the voice beneath. From outside the chapel, footsteps approached. Candles lit themselves. And from the vent, one final line slipped into the air like a knife through lace. "If they silence me again, you will carry the rest." Episode 9. Confessions from the Sleeping. They called it the hour of grace. Between 2 and 3 a.m., when the body is most still and the spirit, they said, is most willing. But that night, as Eloise walked the corridor in bare feet, she realized there was nothing graceful about it. The dormitory was dark, candleless, but not silent. The sisters slept in rows, identical beds, identical breathing, until one of them began to speak. Not in her voice, not in Latin, just above a whisper. "Forgive me, Mother," for I remembered her face when I wasn't supposed to. Eloise stopped, watched the woman's lips move in slow rhythm. Eyes closed, hands folded beneath the blanket, still dreaming, still confessing. Another voice followed, 2 beds down. "Forgive me for hiding her hair in the basin. Forgive me for keeping her name in my throat. Forgive me for liking the way she screamed." It spread like a quiet plague. One by one, the sleeping began to murmur, not to each other, not to God, to someone else, to her, because every confession ended the same way. "Forgive me, Eloise." Her knees buckled. She stumbled to the edge of the room, but the voices followed, mingling, layering, a litany of secrets no waking mind would dare speak. We fed her memory to the choir. We sang her guilt into font. We carved her prayer into the soles of our feet. She walked willingly, but she wasn't supposed to wake up. Eloise covered her ears, but the words moved inside her skull. Echoes not made a sound, but a belonging, as if these confessions weren't stories, but pages, and she was the book. Suddenly, one of the women sat upright, eyes still closed, mouth bleeding slightly from the corners. She turned her head toward Eloise and said, clearly, "You are not the newest here. You are the one we never finished." Then fell back, dead asleep. Eloise ran, back to her cell, locked the door, blocked it with the chair. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and when she opened her notebook, the one she never remembered writing in, the latest page was already filled, in her handwriting, but she hadn't touched the pen. I forgive them, but I do not forget, because forgetting is what made me stay. And below that, a single word written in wax: awake. Episode 10, The Chapel That Writes Back. Eloise carved the question just before dawn. She used the edge of a communion plate. It cut deeper than she expected. The stone gave easily, like it had been waiting to bleed. 3 words. That was all. What am I? She didn't expect an answer. Saint Vesper had taught her many things, but never how to expect kindness. She returned to her cell, slept without dreams. For once, the walls didn't whisper. The silence was almost suspicious. At breakfast, the nuns moved slower than usual. Their eyes lingered a second too long. Their mouths stayed closed even as they chewed. And someone she didn't recognize, slipped a note under her bowl. No name, no greeting, just a smudged sentence. You wrote on her skin. She ran back to the chapel, past the pews, past the pulpit, straight to the wall behind the altar where she had left the question. But the stone was no longer bare. Something had grown from the crack she carved. Pale, porous, jagged, bone. It curled out from the letters like vines, bleached white, and in its twist, a sentence had been etched, not carved, not painted, but formed, words made of marrow. You are what they couldn't bury. Her breath caught in her chest. It didn't rise, not because she was scared, because she remembered that line. She'd heard it whispered before she ever arrived, in dreams, in fire, in the echo of her own heartbeat. That night, she returned again, this time with a question she hadn't dared ask until now. She knelt at the wall, pressed her palm to the cold surface, and whispered, "What did I do?" She stayed for hours. No answer, no voice, just the quiet breath of a chapel holding back thunder. But when she woke the next morning, in her own bed, though she didn't remember walking back, there was a crack in the ceiling, thin, hairline, and from it, something hung, a single vertebra, still red, still warm, and on the wall beside it, written in charcoal she did not own, "You open the mouth. Now the prayer wants its tongue back." Episode 11, My Name Isn't Eloise. She found the book buried beneath her bed, not placed, buried, wrapped in what looked like an old choir robe, tied with prayer beads melted into knots. It had no title, no author, no table of contents, just a phrase carved into the cover, with what might have been a fingernail. For the next, inside names. Dozens. No, hundreds. Each on its own page. Same format. Same heading. Name assigned. Role vessel. Dismissed. Unrecalled/burned/bled out/swallowed. And every third name. Eloise Byrne. She flipped faster. Hands trembling. Breath in her throat. Like a knot that refused to loosen. She found her page. Same heading. Same ink. Same fate pre-written. But one thing was different. Under the final line. Response awake. No dismissal. No fate. Just that word. Awake. She didn't remember writing it. But it was in her handwriting. Not the one she used in journals. The one she used before. Before this name. Before this chapel. Before this body even felt like hers. She went to Sister Talia. Held up the book like it was proof of a murder. Or worse, a prophecy. How many have there been? The nun didn't flinch. Didn't sigh. Just folded her hands and said, enough to keep the mouth closed. I'm not her, Eloise said. You were, Talia replied. Long enough for the prayer to begin. She ran. Through the halls. To the east wing. The forbidden wing. Where the doors were sealed with ash and wax. But tonight, they were open. And inside, mirrors. Dozens. All covered in black veils. She pulled one down. Looked in. And saw herself. But not. Younger. Hair longer. Eyes burned into the reflection like bruises. And on the wall behind the girl in the glass. A name. Written backwards. One she couldn't pronounce. Could only feel. Like a scar beneath her skin. Like a song trapped in her molars. She whispered it. Softly. It hurt to say. Not her throat. Her memory. As if the syllables were claws pulling open something sealed too long. And the mirror shattered. Not with noise. With breath. And from behind the glass, a voice said, you were never Eloise. You were the script. And now you are the speaker. She fell to her knees. The room spun. The veils caught fire, quietly. And the floor beneath her cracked into words. She woke too early. Let her finish the sentence. Episode 12. The body I was promised. She noticed it first in the bath. A scar beneath her left rib. Thin, pale, purposeful. She didn't remember it. Didn't remember pain. Didn't remember healing. But it was there, like a signature written in silence. The sisters never addressed her body. They washed it, clothed it, prepared it, but never said it was hers. That night, she undressed fully for the first time. Not just the robe, the identity. She stood in front of the only mirror not yet shattered. The one they thought she hadn't found. Lit a single candle. And began to map the places that didn't belong. The scar. The birthmark she never had. The freckled constellation that mirrored the chapel ceiling. She traced them all, whispering aloud, who were you? But the mirror didn't reflect her question. It reflected her answer, in the form of another image. Flickering, behind her shoulders, a girl in the same body. Same eyes, but older, somehow, and tired. You were promised to me, the reflection said. She turned. No one there. But the candle had melted into a pool shaped like an open mouth. Inside it, a small gold pin, engraved with 3 letters. Empty H. She didn't recognize them, but her hands began to shake. Because her skin did. She returned to the archive, flipped through the nameless pages again, and found it. Name assigned, Mara Teresa Holland. Status, deceased, ritual incomplete. Body, preserved for re-entry. Host receptive. Burn E. She collapsed. The book fell closed on her chest, and the room darkened, not with shadow, with recognition. The next morning, she did not eat. She sat in the chapel pew, robe loose, hair wet, and waited, not for mass, for the mirror. It blinked before she did, and whispered, the body was never buried, only wrapped in someone else's name. Sister Talia came to her gently, placed a hand on her shoulder, not comforting, confirming. You carried her well, she said, but the prayer needs blood that remembers itself. Eloise stood. Her knees didn't tremble, because the body knew the step. It had taken it before. She walked to the altar, laid herself down, and said, not with fear, but with clarity, I am not the offering. I am the continuation. The floor beneath her pulsed. The chapel doors slammed shut, and from above, the cracked ceiling began to bleed. Not red, gold, the color of inheritance. The color of vows kept too long. Episode 13. The fold was never closed. They called it the fold. Not a church, not a cult, not even a place. A condition, a spiritual posture of perpetual readiness, of holding the body just open enough to let God in, or whatever they thought was still listening. But no one ever told her. The fold was not something you entered. It was something you became. After the ritual, Eloise no longer dreamed. She remembered. Fragments came not as visions, but locations within her bones. A staircase behind her spine. A sealed door at the base of her skull. A garden in her lungs. She was no longer walking the chapel. She was carrying it. One night, Sister Talia placed a stone in her hand. Flat, heavy, warm. The threshold never closes, she said. We simply guard its silence. The stone pulsed once, and a line etched itself across its surface. Not scratched, not written, grown. She held the door by standing still. Eloise understood. Not all the way, not yet, but enough to return to the corridor that led nowhere. The one others avoided. The one they called the spinal wing. Because it curved, because it ached, because it always felt like someone was watching from inside the walls. At the end of the hall, a veil, black, unmoving, not silk, hair. She parted it gently. Behind it, a single wooden chair, empty, but stained with two things, ash and salt. She sat, not out of comfort, out of inheritance. And when she did, the wall before her cracked open, not like a door, like a breath. The passage behind it pulsed with warmth, but not welcoming, expecting. And in the dark, a voice rose, not ahead, not behind. From within, we never close a fold. We folded someone into it. And now she walks the line. Eloise stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but not with fear, with memory, on the walls of the passage. Symbols, carved in repetition, bent like ribs, lit from behind by something not fire, recognition. She reached the final room, circular, stone, silent, in the center, a mirror, shattered, but behind the glass, still moving, a reflection that no longer looked like her. Not wrong, just older, used, and in its mouth, no tongue, only a rolled parchment, a scripture made of flesh. She touched the mirror, felt her fingers pass through, and from the silence, the final truth. You weren't chosen to close the gate. You were chosen to remember that it never did. Episode 14. She was a scripture. The words stopped appearing on the walls, because they no longer needed stone. They had her. It began with her skin. Thin lines across her arms. Not scars, not veins, but sentences. Short phrases she couldn't read in the mirror, but felt in her breath. Each heartbeat turned the page. Each blink sealed a verse. And in the silence between footsteps, she heard them rearranging. The sisters no longer guided her. They followed, eyes lowered, feet bare, hands clasped like children before a holy flame. They whispered not to her, but through her, and every word made her bones feel heavier, not with weight, with memory. One morning, the candles bowed when she passed. The altar bled, not blood, ink, dark, thick, living. It crawled toward her footprints and disappeared, like it knew who it came for. In the sanctuary, the choir no longer sang in unison. They waited for her breath to choose the key, and the moment she inhaled, they began to echo what hadn't yet been spoken. It wasn't song. It was transcription. She returned to the chamber of mirrors, all veils gone, each reflection different, each showing a version of her she had already been. One wept, One bled. One opened her chest and pulled out a scroll, still warm. She stared into the only mirror that cracked when she entered, and the crack whispered, "You weren't sent to remember. You were sent to be written." She knelt, not from surrender, from instinct, and when her knees touched the floor, the stone glowed, not gold, not red, but a pale white, like paper just before it accepts ink. The ground beneath her pulsed, and the first voice returned. Not a nun, not a priest, not the chapel, the fold itself. We do not pass down scripture. We prepare a body to carry it. And now you are full. She tried to speak, but her mouth stayed open, and instead of words, ash poured out, letter-shaped, soft, holy, and behind her, the sisters whispered the closing line, not from a book, but from her spine. We did not read her. We were read by her. Episode 15, she was never buried, only paused. No bell rang that morning. No choir sang. The candles lit themselves at dawn, then flickered out. The chapel door stood open, as if someone had just left, but no footsteps marked the ground, only a circle of ash. Where Eloise had last knelt, they didn't say her name. They never did, not out loud. To speak the name is to summon the memory, and memory, in St. Vesper, is a gate that opens both ways. But the sisters knew. They passed the place where she had been, with eyes down, breath held, fingers pressed against their ribs, as if to say, "We carry her now." The altar remained untouched, but the air above it shimmered, as though something heavy, something holy, had been lifted, but left a dent in the air. A fold, still warm, still waiting. Down in the archive, a new page had appeared in the Book of Names, blank at first. Then slowly, letters began to surface. Not carved, risen, EB, scripture complete. Pause for next mouth. Somewhere in the spinal wing, the walls began to hum again. Not loud, just enough for those who could still remember what forgetting had cost. And far below the chapel, where the roots of St. Vesper touched silence itself, a single heartbeat pulsed through the stone. Not fast, not desperate, just deliberate, as if it were marking time, until the prayer could be resumed. And when the next girl came, brought in quiet, given robes that already fit, led to the empty cell with a mirror that only cracked for her, she found one thing on the pillow, a scrap of wax, curved, soft, still carrying warmth, and etched with one word: continue.